Welcome into our guest, the first guest in 2023. Bryson, you get to be the first person who's on the CFP podcast here to kick off the 2023 CFL season. But I thought we needed to have you in because all things are new, including Pro Football Focus, joining up with the Canadian Football League to give more in-depth information and analysis. And you are the man who basically has debuted PFF CFL information on social media at PFF _Bryson is where you can find him. Thanks for being here, man, and welcome to the CFL content family.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited for it.
What has your journey been through sports football? How do you become the PFF CFL guy?
It's been a long process. I I was at school in Ottawa up here in Canada, and I big stats guy was doing my math degree in stats. Found PFF, the website, and back then it was a tiny website, right? Not a lot of teams subscribed, just kind of like a thrown together site by a couple of guys that were doing grading. I liked it because they did like O-line grading and stuff like that, sort of more advanced stuff that I had been looking for. So I sort of was following them as a fan, and then one day they put up an application saying anyone who wants to apply for a job can get it. I was like, all right, sounds good. So I applied, got in part time, worked hard, got full time. That was 9 years ago. So I've been there ever since, and have been pushing for Canada for a long time. Obviously, as a Canadian, I wanted the CFL to get a little bit, but obviously there's been issues with the COVID sort of canceling the season. I think we were sort of going to have them then, but then that set it back a couple of years just because of that season being canceled. And now we're finally here getting to do it, and they're letting me run a lot of it just because I'm the Canadian and been pushing it for a long time. So I'm pretty excited for it.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on that. And I would also say that, yeah, I don't want to reveal too much because I don't know what's sensitive or what's not, but I remember being at, I want to say CFL week in Winnipeg, which would have been like 2018, 19, somewhere in there. And like I was somebody who was interested in kind of like, doing heat charts and looking at quarterback tendencies. And somebody from the CFL came up to me and they went, "Hey, PFS just down the hall. Like you should go say hi to those guys." So that goes all the way back, like you're saying, like it's a long time. Like I don't think people around the CFL fandom realize how long this has been coming. And you obviously understand it better than anybody being in the house with them for that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and part of it too is that we have had CFL clients for a long time because they use our college football our data,
Right.
and our NFL data for guys that are coming up to Canada, right? So they like to have that. So we've had a couple teams use us for since around 2018, I think, is when we had our first CFL client. And then we've been pushing for that to get the whole league involved and do their league. And now it's finally coming to sort of fruition.
What is that moment like for you when you find out not only A, hey, we're doing CFL stuff, but B, hey, Bryson, you're doing CFL stuff.
Yeah, very exciting. I obviously grew up watching CFL along with the NFL, but big CFL guy, played Canadian football. So I've been just really excited to get to do some Canadian football and it's been fun to teach sort of most of our company's American.
Right.
So I've never really seen CFL beyond like a few things here. So it's fun to sort of teach them our different rules, different way it's played up here. So it's been a lot of fun for me.
How difficult has it been for not just you, but for the whole PFF construct to how much does the three downs in the wider field and all those things kind of change the grading process that PFF does?
It's honestly the hardest part, I think, for us was just getting our sort of system to accept it
Right.
because our system is designed for the NFL and American, right? So the college football, and when we do the USFL or the XFL, it's all sort of based on the same thing. But then with Canada, we got a wider field, a longer field, less downs. So that's been tough. But the grading, I think, it's been good. We've had a couple of guys who've coached or no coaches from up here. So we've talked to them and sort of figured out the differences between like having that extra down in the NFL versus not in the CFL, sort of grading it a little differently. I found it's not been too much. There's been a few things here and there with that, but generally it's football. It's football. You sort of find right, and yeah, I think that's kind of it. I think coverages too have been a little tricky because of the extra person,
Right.
the extra player makes it a little more difficult for some of those guys to see what they're running. But I think in the end, it isn't. Once you get it, it's not too big a difference.
It's funny because obviously covering the Canadian Football League, like it's always a conversation of how much Americans want to invest in learning the game and how much they just want to apply American sensibilities to the CFL. Like I'm sure you're very, very familiar with this concept. And the reason that I laugh when I say that is I remember when Jerry Glanville came up and was around the Hamilton Tiger Cats early on, and he was kind of saying to me, I think I'm starting to figure it out. It's taken me a couple of days, but I think I'm starting to get it. And I talked to somebody and I said, "Hey, Glanville says he's starting to figure it out." And then he gets named the defensive coordinator, of course, not long afterwards for Hamilton. And I'm like, "Well, what did he figure out? Like, what was it about the league that he had?" He goes, "He didn't figure out anything. He just decided to play 11 on 11 and lock the outside man." It's like, right, because that's a pretty common concept. Is that a lot
Yeah.
of a lot of American coaches just want to play American football and the wide side wide receiver and the wide side field corner. You guys are just on your island, just we'll play man out there and we'll do all the normal stuff in here,
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? Like it's always interesting of how much guys actually want to integrate and understand versus how much they just want to do what they do, and just the 12th guy is the 12th guy, and that's really foreign and scary to us. So you're just going to stay out there.
Absolutely right. And I think you see that a lot with Americans and even American players coming in here. It's hard for them sometimes, I'm sure, to adjust to the different ways, right? With the waggle on the receivers and the speed difference and the width difference. Like you said, right? Just have that guy way outside, leave him there, and then run your regular 11 on 11 up front. But I think sort of if you can integrate the CFL way, it's a lot better,
Right. Yeah.
obviously, for the sport and for how you play, because just it makes it a little easier.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to ask you about in this conversation is the idea that, aside from the American Canadian stuff, and obviously it's a huge help with you being in Ottawa, being Canadian, playing Canadian football, all the rest, but it's like when you see the way that the game is constructed, literally, like anytime we had the four down discussion here in Canada, I've always been somebody who's like, listen, four down has its benefits, no doubt. But if you give CFL coordinators an extra down, oh my God, like the offense is never coming off the field. There's
Yeah.
no chance, right? And so at the rushing averages that you get in this league with the yard off the ball and all the rest, I'm like, it's just not going to be a better product. It obviously leans to quarterback play. And the thing I used to love being an ex-quarterback was, we have a run play on the inside on first down that goes for 2 yards, or I have an incomplete pass on first down. By the time the whistle blows ending first down, I'm already looking at my play band and going, just please give me my favorite second down concept, because this is on me now most of the time, right? You might pop a draw screen, whatever, but it's like I used to love that feeling of this is on me as the quarterback now to go and get this conversion on second down. Talk me through your work with PFF, specifically as it revolves around second down, like the pressure on the quarterback, how you grade out the quarterbacks, the different level of importance that's given to it based on, our construct versus what you've done previously with American football. I'm just intrigued by the idea of PFF and the second down being that pressure packed, essentially third down in the States.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of sort of how we treat it, right? Like it's almost like it is just a third down. Just treat it like it is the last down. And like you said, I think obviously with the way CFL works, the three downs, that it is all on the quarterback sort of at the end there. It's a lot of those passes to get the yards. You don't want to throw short of the sticks too much because you only have that one sort of chance, especially if your first down play doesn't go for very much. So we sort of look at it like that, right? And like if you're as a quarterback, we're looking for him to throw it sort of past the sticks, or at least in a way that gives his receiver a chance to get it. Like if he's leading him for if it's like 2nd and 8 and he gives a 6-yard throw, but he's leading him away from coverage up into the first down, we could give him a little credit for that, right? But we're just sort of looking for him to be trying to get that first down from that second down. If he's throwing like a 2-yard screen, we're not going to give him a bonus because that's right. It's all on his running back or receiver catching it, right? And so we're sort of looking at it like that to just sort of make it like he's got to get the first down here if he wants to get a positive grade.
He is Bryson Vesnaver. He joins us here on the CFP podcast, the A block, and getting all set for 2023. By the time that people hear this, week 1 will already be in the books, coming out Monday at the beginning of week number 2. And we're going into this season. Bryson's already got some content up there. You can check him out again on social at PFF_Bryson is where you can find him and see the articles. You've done some kind of preseason all-star teams. You've done quarterback rankings as well. How much did you go back? Is it beyond 2022? Because I know the teams were kind of using this stuff last year. Was it beyond 22 that you had to watch everything, grade everything, and get a sense? Because I got to say, like, again, as tracking my own stuff and watching the games closely and calling games week in, week out, we're both kind of living and breathing this, but your all-star teams, I thought, were spot on going into this season. And I imagine that comes from more than just 1 year's worth of information.
No, I appreciate that. So we only have graded last year's season. We've only backfilled the 2022, but obviously I've watched CFL for a long time. Yeah. So a lot of those rankings are sort of my own opinions going back a few years, right? Not just last year. So I obviously use a lot of last year's grades because I did a lot of the grading as well. But a lot of it also is just me knowing these guys, having seen them play for a long time and following the league and understanding who's playing well, who's not, who's good for a bounce back, right? So yeah, but we have only so far graded the 2022 season.
What was the most interesting thing for you in terms of grading 2022?
Um, Tough. I think just watching. I mean, obviously watching the Bombers offense, right? And Dalton Schoen. I used to play receiver, so seeing a slot guy like that come in and the NFL and have such a dominant season, and he was so good. That was fun to watch. I think. Um, it's fun seeing different guys that you don't really know come out and have really good seasons, or guys that maybe their statistics weren't always there, but if you look at their underlying play, it was strong. Like I think a lot of, and it happens a lot with PFF with our pass rush grades, right? Like if they don't get the sacks, people are kind of like, "Wow, that guy's not a good pass rusher." But if you look at the pressures and affecting the quarterback, he might be really good. He's just not finishing with the sack for whatever reason, not necessarily his fault. So we can see that sort of, and see some of the guys who maybe last year didn't get a lot of sacks in the CFL, but were doing a lot of disruption and playing really well.
I love that. I also I have to I want to expound a little bit on this too. That when I first tried to get into doing any game tracking whatsoever, for me it was born out of very similar to you. I saw PFF, loved it, was a big fan, but I also was seeing things that were written, about Zach Collaros when he was in Hamilton, where it's like he hasn't been good on the deep ball lately. That was like in the local paper, and I'm like, based on what? Like
Yeah.
we're just saying things now. Like we're coming up with opinions and we're not basing them on fact. It's at that
Mhm.
point the league didn't even really have completion percentage over 20 yards in air and all that kind of stuff. So I tried to get into doing time from snap to throw and number of blitzers and all the in-depth things that PFF does. It nearly drove me insane. For about a month, I tried to do the fine-tooth comb and go through and track all of these things, and it almost drove me crazy. You mentioned off the top here, 9 years ago, and I got in and I worked hard, and now I've got myself an opportunity to work through the CFL stuff. Talk to me about what it means to work hard, as you simplify it, at PFF, because I know for a fact, because I've known people who have been in and around that ecosystem, it's crazy what you guys actually put time and effort into, and it creates great information. But people at the end of the day end up seeing, oh, this guy made more big time throws than anybody else. I don't think people understand how much work goes into taking all of the factors in front of you in any given snap and producing a simple stat like that.
Yeah, well, I think that's fair. I think you're right. I think for us, it's a long process. It's a lot of work. Like you said, it's a lot of watching film. Like I always say, people ask me like, "Do you get sick of football and watching it?" And I'm like, I don't, but like you have to love football to do this, because I'm watching football, right? Like 8 hours a day or more every day. And it's a lot of watching the same play over and over again and looking at it from different angles and trying to figure out what the defense was doing, what the offense wanted to do, what kind of happened, right? And so it is a lot of that. But I think our grading system is very good because it's not just one guy doing it, right? Like I'll do one pass and then someone goes through it and reviews it. And if there's a question, we'll ask our review team, and then we'll ask some coaches, and sort of, so there's, on any given play, there's sometimes like 10, 15 guys looking at that same play coming together for a grade, which makes it a lot easier because then there's not a lot of pressure on you specifically to get it right. You have a team to rely on, and in that way come to consensus. And so that's why usually, like, I know people, obviously there's a lot of hate sometimes, people who don't like what we grade because their player didn't get graded well, right?
Right.
But if you look at it, we're not biased because we have so many guys working on it. It's not just a fan of the team grading it and grading his guys good and his enemies bad. And then, I mean, every time we've had guys come in and look at our grades, they're like, "Yep, this matches sort of what we had internally." And I think that's sort of the biggest thing for me, knowing that our grading system is good, is seeing these coaches or players come in and sort of be like, "Oh yeah, that's what we had as well," or pretty close to it, right? And
Right.
that's made me sort of figure, yeah, this is good. We're doing a good job.
Do you find that there's less variability as well because there is that kind of fallback of many different voices? Because if you have one person grading out a full game and you have a different person grading up a full game, you're going to compare those two grades. You're going to go, well, they see the game differently. But when you have that many eyes on the game, does it kind of bring things towards almost like a normalization?
Absolutely, absolutely does, right? And I think that's, we try to keep it like with our training program and all that and our guide, we do have a sort of, like, it is not as subjective as people might think it would be, but it is still some subjectivity because, like you said, people see the game a little differently, in different ways. So, but having that many people come to it and knowing what sort of we're trying to get to, it all kind of does come towards like a normalization and sort of a middle ground where it's all very similar grading because of that, just because of all the people looking at it.
When people ask you what you do for a living, what do you tell them?
I usually tell them I get paid to watch football. But yeah, and then I'll go into depth and do more like it's and sort of advanced scouting and analytics and stuff like that. But often just say watching football is what I go is I default to.
I was gonna say, I imagine you handing out a PFF business card when people see you in the title it just says football nerd,
Yeah,
right? Because
pretty much. Yeah.
that's kind of what we all define ourselves as. Like, if you love the game, you love
Mhm.
watching, whether you love watching film or you love the analytics or whatever, it's like football nerds kind of like the catch-all of like, I get paid to do football nerdy things, right? And
Yeah,
it,
and
but
I
it, it becomes a badge of pride.
absolutely, and it's always funny because I'll be working and then I'll have a break and I'm like, ah, I'll watch some football just for fun, right? Like even when I'm on my break, I'll still watch football just for fun, and it's I love the game, right? I'm sure you know, obviously being around it all the time, you have to love it if you want to be around it all the time, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, certainly. And in season is probably the most adrenaline inducing thing, not just being in the booth, obviously, because when the red light goes on and you're on national television, if you
Hmm.
mess up, then that's going to exist forever kind of thing. But for
Yeah.
me, it's the idea that to match the deadlines that we have going into week 2, week 3, week 4, for me, it's like I've got in week 2, Calgary against Ottawa is my first game of the year. And I'm like, if I don't have my prep done by the time we kick off, this train ain't slowing down.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
schedule's going to keep going, right? Like how much of that pressure do you kind of enjoy and thrive off of? Okay, I gotta get through this stuff because
Mhm.
Thursday night's coming quick after a Sunday game.
Yeah, I love it, right? I think like their whole, and that's kind of what we base our company on, right? We tell teams we'll have this work done by this date, and then it's like, all right, guys, like full speed ahead to get it done because these teams need it. And I think the motivating factor for a lot of us is that like these teams need our data to game plan, and a lot of these teams are using us to game plan. So it's like, all right, we have to get this done because they need it for we can't if they get it Friday night, it's useless to them because they can't put that in the game plan for Sunday, right? But or whatever day it ends up being. But like if we get it done on Monday, they got a whole week to prep with it, so for us, that's for me at least, that's a big motivating factor is knowing that these teams are using it to game plan and to sort of get ahead of their opponent and knowing that all right, I got to get this done quickly. And I think that pressure is a lot of fun to sort of have it, knowing that it is used for something good.
Who's the player that you feel like you know the best? Like, because I find it funny when you watch as much football as we do, that some players I know personally, right? Whether I've been
Yeah.
around them, shook their hand, said hello to them. There's some guys in this league that I've been covering for 5 years. I've never met them in person because,
Right.
they play in the West. I've never shook their hand. I've never been on a Zoom with them or anything like that, seen them at any events. And yet their games, I feel like sometimes the guys that I haven't even met in person or gotten to know, I feel like I know them because
Yeah.
I've been watching them so much over time that you speak about them so much, you analyze them so much. Who's a player that you feel like in the CFL right now after tracking 22 that you just know them, you know them inside and out?
Yeah. So what's funny as I mentioned it was Dalton Schoen, not just last year's CFL, but I graded him throughout college
Ah,
at
yes.
Kansas State. So like for me, it's been a lot of years of watching him play. And when he got to Canada, I was like, oh yeah, I remember watching this. I love watching this guy in college. So he's a guy that, and as an ex receiver myself, right? I latch on to a lot of receivers sometimes. So he's definitely a guy that I've watched and I love watching, and probably the guy that I've watched the most film on of the CFL players.
So were you on the Big 12 beat?
Yes, I was. For a long time, I was the Big 12 sort of analyst.
Amazing. That's great. So you would have been the only person in the entire CFL world who would have known that Dalton Schoen was anything then, because we all saw week 1, week 2, week 3, and we're like, huh, look at that guy, eh? Who is
Yeah.
that? Right? Like, and that's the thing for fans is that kind of come out of nowhere, but it's obvious that having access to PFF's database when
Yeah.
it comes to the grading you had done on Schoen, that likely would have piqued the interest of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers if they're going through and looking at what
Yeah.
what this player's fit could be for them.
Yeah. And especially, I think, is where our grades go. It is right. If you look at his stats at Kansas State, they weren't anything special because Kansas State wasn't a big down the field passing team, right? They did a lot of running, a lot of quarterback options. So, but if you look at his like grading, his production, like whenever he got targeted, he was great, and his route running was good. So it was one of those things where like if you just looked at his stats, you'd be like, well, whatever. He's just an average receiver that didn't get drafted or didn't make it in the NFL. But look at his underlying numbers and his underlying production. If the Bombers looked at that, they'd be like, oh, this guy might have something here, and maybe we bring him up, give him a chance to sort of see more in the more wide open game of the CFL. He might do better, and obviously he did incredibly.
Who is your favorite football player growing up?
Tom Brady, I'm a Patriots
Are
fan.
you a Patriots fan? Yeah. So
Yeah,
I relate because playing quarterback, I was a Brady guy from the time that I was very, very, very little. Problem was that I kind of fell in love with a little guy that wore 7 in Buffalo in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And so was a Flutie kid as well. I grew up in Kingston, so being from Eastern Ontario.
This is actually sort of funny. I'm also from Kingston.
Oh, you really?
Yeah, so I played you and you played for Frontenac, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I played for KCVI. Not well, but I think I was a year below you, so I definitely played you at least once.
Man, those KCVI games, that's amazing. First of all, I'm glad that you mentioned that, but and it makes total sense that a smart person would come from KCVI
Yeah,
and
thank you.
a stupid broadcaster would come from Frontenac. But yeah, those KCVI games, they were, being played over at Winston Churchill, right? I
Yeah,
believe, and it was at one point, I don't know if it was when I was there or when I left, but I think we only played KC once or twice, and I had learned that like QE, LC, and KC were combining teams, and now
yeah,
obviously that's become the Kingston Super School, which they just generically called the Bears because they
yeah,
didn't want to choose anything that might offend anybody. But yeah, I mean it's amazing the connection points that you have, right, in
yeah.
Canadian football, and certainly having that connection of growing up in Kingston. I'm sure that you also went to Queens football games.
Oh yeah, all the
Yeah.
time. And I was a big when Queens won the CIS. That one year they won the Vanier. I was every game I was there, and it was awesome to see. Like Danny Brannigan back then, a lot of fun to watch.
Imagine grading out Danny Brannigan using PFF where it's just catch the snap and stand.
I think about that every day when I watch. I recently, I don't know why, but I went back and watched one of those games. And I was just like, he had like 500 yards in one of the playoff games. I think it was the Yates Cup against Western, and I was
Yeah.
just he gets there, and he stands there, and he just bombs it. I'm like, how is this happening? Like, there's no drop. There's not even a two-step drop. It's just
It's the most unique style that I think
yeah.
I've seen. Yeah, but it's yeah, I mean having that understanding of even the university game in Canada, I'm sure helps you
Mhm.
massively in being able to communicate to people here going forward with the CFL and everything that you guys are doing. Bryson, this has been super fun. I can't believe I feel like I just went to a high school reunion out of nowhere. This is
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Didn't even go to the same school, but no, it's great to
No.
catch up with you, man. Let people again know where they can catch all your work throughout the season now that PFF is powering much of the information behind the CFL.
Yeah, yeah. So you can check us out, just www.pff.com. That's where all my articles will be. I'm going to be writing a bunch, usually at least once a week, probably more throughout the season. And then I'll post it on my Twitter at PFF_Bryson. Stay tuned. Follow us, follow PFF at PFF as well. And we'll be doing a lot of CFL stuff this year. We'll put in a lot of content, we're hoping. So that'll be, I'm really excited for it.
Awesome. Congratulations, man. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Yeah, thank you so much.